On April 1970, a blast from an oxygen tank forced Apollo 13 astronauts to abandon their lunar landing mission and fight for their very survival. But in the face of death, they achieved something truly remarkable. And it has inspired me like nothing else in my life. This is the story of Apollo 13. It was supposed to be the third manned moon landing, but instead became one of NASA's most harrowing missions. After an explosion that crippled their spacecraft and killed thousands of potential futures, the crew had to rely on sheer ingenuity and willpower to survive. Their story is one of courage, camaraderie, faith, and hope against all odds. And I believe that each of us can learn something about ourselves by understanding what they went through. When Apollo 13 launched, the world was ecstatic. For the first time ever, we were attempting to land humans on the far side of the moon, which would allow us to study the mysterious and previously unseen area where the moon was formed. As the rocket ascended into space, millions watched worldwide hoping for another giant leap for mankind. But 2 days later, everything changed. At 1:28 a.m., an oxygen tank in the service module exploded, knocking out power, propulsion, and communication. Mission Control realized with horror that if they didn't fix the ship, the 3 astronauts aboard would die. On Earth, NASA engineers and scientists worked tirelessly to figure out how to save the astronauts. Meanwhile, in space, they had to ration their remaining power supply, which would only last for 48 hours. With no way to generate more, they also had to shed layers of clothing as temperatures inside the command module plummeted to below freezing. And just to make matters worse, they ran out of water after only 2 days. Despite these dire circumstances, when Mission Control contacted the astronauts to tell them to abort their mission, the crew calmly responded, "Roger, we're still in business." From that moment on, the goal was no longer to land on the moon, but simply to get the astronauts home alive. What happened next remains one of the greatest achievements in human history. To understand what the crew did to survive, we must take a brief detour into the logistics of space travel. When Apollo 13 left Earth, it carried 3 astronauts and enough supplies to keep them alive for 4 days. If they had landed on the moon as planned, they would have spent 2 days there before returning home. But because of the explosion, they never made it to the moon and had to spend 5 days in space before NASA could safely bring them home. To pull this off, engineers at NASA used the power of 3, which stands for people, planning, and patience. First, let's look at the people. To accomplish such a daunting task, NASA assembled a team of experts from across the country. This included scientists who calculated trajectories, engineers who designed fixes, psychologists who assessed risks, and technicians who kept everything running smoothly. By leveraging the skills of so many talented individuals, they were able to overcome every obstacle that stood in their way. The second part of the Trinity is planning. In order to rescue the astronauts, NASA needed a detailed plan of action. They had to consider fuel consumption, gravitational forces, and countless other variables. And even then, they knew that things could go wrong at any moment. So they created backup plans for those backups. Through careful consideration of all possible outcomes, NASA was able to develop a strategy that ultimately saved the lives of the Apollo 13 crew. The final piece of the puzzle is patience. Throughout the ordeal, NASA remained calm and collected despite the immense pressure they were under. They knew that rushing would only increase the chances of making mistakes, which could jeopardize the safety of the astronauts. Instead, they took their time to assess the situation, consider all of their options, and develop a foolproof plan of action. Now that we understand the importance of people, planning, and patience, let's see how they applied these lessons to save the Apollo 13 astronauts. After the explosion, the team quickly realized that the explosion had damaged both of the ship's main engines and knocked out its guidance system. Without these vital components, the ship couldn't fire its engines to correct its trajectory or perform other maneuvers. So NASA's first priority was to repair the guidance system. They did this by sending in an unmanned space vehicle called the lunar module, which successfully delivered a new guidance package to the astronauts. With this new equipment, NASA was able to restore communication and begin charting a course back to Earth. But there was a problem. Because of the explosion, Apollo 13 now had too much energy to safely enter the atmosphere. So NASA devised a plan to use gravity to slow the ship down. They would fire the engine for a few minutes each day to put the spacecraft into a lower orbit around the Moon. Once it was close enough to Earth, they could use atmospheric drag to bring it home. NASA's plan hinged on one crucial assumption, that the lunar module could function as a heat shield. But to do this, it needed to be oriented with its blunt side facing forward. Unfortunately, when the module was delivered, it ended up sideways. Astronaut Fred Hayes solved this problem by literally flipping the module over using the ship's robotic arm. Using these ingenious solutions, NASA was able to safely bring the ship and its crew back to Earth. But the story doesn't end there. You see, the original plan called for Apollo 13 to splash down in the Pacific Ocean near San Francisco. But due to shifting winds and currents, NASA realized that the astronauts could end up anywhere along a 3,000-mile stretch of coastline. This meant that search and rescue teams might not find the crew for days, exposing them to the dangerous elements without food, water, or medical attention. To avoid this fate, NASA asked the crew to fire their engine one last time and aim for a remote stretch of desert in southern Texas, known as the White Sands Missile Range. Incredibly, the astronauts managed to hit their target within 6 miles, allowing rescuers to reach them within hours. In the end, Apollo 13 returned safely to Earth despite the odds being stacked against them. This was thanks to a combination of meticulous planning, scientific innovation, and sheer human determination. In fact, one of the astronauts, Jim Lovell, had prepared for this exact scenario in a training simulation 18 months earlier. He later said, "We had practiced this drill so many times in simulations that we knew what to do. I was so thankful that we had done that work that we didn't really want to do at the time, but we did it anyway." These simulations proved invaluable when it came time to apply the knowledge gained from them. Thanks to the work of so many dedicated individuals on the ground and in space, Apollo 13 returned safely to Earth. But the story doesn't end there. The incredible bravery and quick thinking of the Apollo 13 crew have inspired generations of scientists, engineers, and adventurers. In the aftermath of the mission, NASA conducted a thorough investigation to determine what went wrong and how it could be prevented in the future. Ultimately, they found that a combination of faulty wiring and poor workmanship had led to the explosion of the oxygen tank. But they also discovered that the crew's quick thinking and resourcefulness had prevented a disaster. In the years since Apollo 13, NASA has implemented a number of changes to improve the safety of its spacecraft and crew. For example, they have developed more rigorous testing procedures, improved communication protocols, and increased the amount of training that astronauts receive. Additionally, NASA has created a new position called the Flight Director, who is responsible for monitoring the status of the spacecraft and making sure that all systems are functioning properly. By learning from the mistakes that were made on Apollo 13, NASA has been able to ensure that future missions are both safer and more successful. Apollo 13 is a testament to the ingenuity and determination of the human spirit. In the face of impossible odds, the crew of Apollo 13 displayed incredible bravery and quick thinking, which ultimately saved their lives and paved the way for future space exploration. Their story reminds us that no matter how dire the situation may seem, it is always possible to find a way through with the right attitude and mindset. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you did, please subscribe for more videos like this in the future. Until next time, keep looking up